Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Norwood Board of Selectmen. The meeting is being held in the Harry Butters Chambers and as well as being broadcast on NCM. As always, we will start with a Pledge of Allegiance followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we've got a few appointments this evening, and Mr. Slater was kind enough to trade with our first appointment, who's running a little bit behind. It's starting to snow out there, so we hope that he gets here safely. Mr. Slater, the chairman of the Middle School Building Committee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me, and to Mr. Mizuko, the other members of the board, welcome. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation which I'd like to give, but before I say that, I want to note that the project is on time and on budget. So, all right. So, quite a lot of work has been done. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you a little bit of progress. This is the site in the middle of October. Site's pretty much been cleared. The outlines of the foundation, but really very little else was done. They did do some work to relocate some of the lights in the field, which was done, on schedule. If you look at the next slide, which is beginning of November, you can see again clearly the outlines of the building, the foundation work, and they started to do some of the steel. And the steel was begun in Building C, which is the area closest to Washington Street. Next slide. This was taken beginning, or actually the middle of December. Most of the steel work has been done. Again, it was done very efficiently. That was done, before the schedule was called for, which was great. And again, everything really went well, and there were no problems. This shows the site today. Again, the steel work has been done. The building has been wrapped in several areas where they're looking to do concrete pours. And again, everything is on schedule and going well. Knock on wood. Okay, next slide shows a couple of shots of some of the concrete work which is being done. Again, they're working from Building C to the middle area, which is Building B, then eventually to Building A, and things have gone well. Next slide is installing of their infiltration system. This is an infiltration system for stormwater. The stormwater from the building will be infiltrated back into the ground. It will not be going into our stormwater system, which, again, is a good thing considering some of the problems we've had with the system in the past. If you look at the next slide, this is the topping off ceremony, which is always an important milestone in a project. It was done actually a couple of weeks earlier than we anticipated, which, again, nothing wrong with that. I think on the left you can see the beam that was signed by the students and the project team, as well as many members of Town of Norwood. And the other slide, you can see them hoisting the beam that was signed by everybody into place. That, for the most part, even though it's not official, it means that the steel work is essentially done. Some of our project milestones. I'm not going to go over all of these, but again, we broke ground beginning of June. Everything continued on schedule. Foundation work was done in October, and structural steel has been finished. And as we speak, the pouring some additional slabs. So we want to get that work done. Some of the milestones, installing the roof. Project weather tight means that's basically when they're going to finish all the windows. The project will be weather tight in terms of being able to do work inside, but beginning of December is when all the windows are going to be done. Elevator shafts, working on MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing work. A lot of that work should be done. Substantial completion will be beginning of June of 2025. The existing building will be demolished beginning June 30th, which is right after the school ends. And the new field, the new turf field, which will be in front of the building, will be finished in April 30th. Essentially, what they have to do is they have to demolish the old building, cart all the material away, level it, and then you're going to have a little bit of bad weather, but then they're going to complete the field beginning or ending in April of 2026. Just looking at the project update, the construction schedule. Again, it's on prediction. Change orders have not been excessive, and we have plenty of money available in contingency in case we do have issues, which issues always come up during construction, but we think we have a sufficient contingency to cover that. Looking at the next slide, which is the overall project budget, $150 million. This includes fees for the architect, which is AI3, the owner's project manager, which is Vertex, formerly Compass, some basic miscellaneous costs, but everything is within the budget that was voted in town meeting, and we do have, in our view, sufficient contingency to take us through the project, without any major concerns. Again, something always could happen, but as of now, things are going well, and we're pretty optimistic. So, with that, I open it up to questions and go from there.
Well, thank you, Mr. Slater, Chairman Slater. Just before the rest of my colleagues say it, I'll say it first, though, because I'm on the committee as well as Mr. Donnelly. But we appreciate the work that you're doing and the transparency with which you're working. And I agree, it's been a really good process, and so we appreciate that.
Good, thank you very much.
I just wanted to get in front of everybody else, because they're going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I will say that there's a lot of other people in town who've done some.
I know you're not a
project.
yeah. With that being said, questions, comments from the board. Ms. Groh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also, to echo the chairman's thank you to the whole team. It's been a great project. I've been very impressed with the pace of it. Also really appreciative of the public updates, keeping the community really up to date on every step of the way. And it's been really great, so very, very pleased, very excited too. Do you, I don't know, you might not have the answer to this. Do we know when the demolition happens for the old building? Are we planning on having a little community send-off for that?
We haven't really thought about that
Okay.
yet. There was certainly one for the high school, which was a special building to a lot of people
Yeah.
in town. The middle school, the existing one, maybe not as much, but we'll see what we can do.
Cool.
Thank you.
Ms. Seth.
I want to thank you for all your work. I know, Alan, it's been years and years for you on this project, so congratulations to you and your committee, and a job well done, and I look forward to seeing that on the back side of my house over Bob's house.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Plasko.
Just ditto to the compliments
Yeah.
for yourself and everyone working on this project. It's a big project, important to the town. I know I go down twice a day in the morning and see the fellows arriving to work and getting up there and getting started. And about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and watch them leaving, and the progress in between. And it's amazing the number of people working down there and the work that they're accomplishing on any given day. It's great. I'm really amazed at just even the top on the building and what's involved in doing that, so that they can do things like pouring the concrete this time of year and everything, and protecting the workers a little bit from the elements. And it's amazing. I don't know if people have really taken a look around from different angles, but maybe we're Mr. Sad, Mr. Donahue, but also I've gone up to, headed up towards Pleasant Street, towards Walpole, and looked back. It's amazing, that white top standing up there, how tall it is and how big the building looks, so. Where is the gym? Is it out in the far front, almost there where they're,
If you go back to the first slide, the gymnasium is the area on the right.
So that'll be
The far, we're right over there, yeah.
so that's good, because that'll be closest to the field too, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
Well, great work, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Slater, for the update. Just a couple of things, and not too much, because Mr. Lane says, we're both on the committee. I thank you for a very well-run meeting. You're very effective as a chair of the committee. You had the good experience with the high school, so we're so blessed to have a veteran chair of a building committee with us today. As Mr. Sad said, it's a building I can see from my backyard. I walk back there. I am simply amazed with the progress made by the steel workers. When you see that first slide that you showed back in September, October, completely devoid of steel work, and to look at it today, all three main sections of that building are erected from a steel perspective. My compliments to the contractor for a job well done.
They're actually ahead of schedule.
Yes, yeah, and from a committee standpoint, we're also lucky to have a project manager and a construction team, W.T. Rich, as well as Vertex, who work very well together. Meetings are just well documented, and our questions are everything we've asked them for. They've delivered. You might want to just let people know that all of our meetings are recorded and available on the project site, which is great transparency for folks who can't make the meetings. Everything is on the project website, and we do have a public forum beginning of every meeting,
Right.
and we've had a couple of folks come before our meetings. We open up to the public forum, and and we've had some good input from citizens as well to the meeting. So we look forward to a continuation. It's still got a ways to go, but it's just really gratifying to see that the project now is on time, actually just a little bit ahead of time, and on budget in particular. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Donnelly. Yeah, and I'll just add too, Mr. Slater, people recently opened up their tax bills, and there was an increase in there, and a lot of it has to do with the override for the school. So I think they're putting their trust in us to do a good job and to, like you said, keep things on budget and on a tight timeline. So, if that weren't the case, it would be really hard, and even harder to sell to people. So I just appreciate the work that you're doing, because those are some conversations that I've had with people, and they've called and asked about their tax bill, but the thing that we can do is make sure this project is really well run. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the work you're doing.
Well, we're fortunate. We have a terrific project team. The architect are the same ones who did the high school. Same thing with the owner's project manager, Vertex, previously known as Compass. And as you know, you're chairman of that subcommittee. We picked a construction manager at risk,
Yep.
W.T. Rich.
That'd be
Those
great.
guys are terrific. Whenever you need something from them, they're always there. And we're lucky we have the group that we do.
I agree. Next, you'll build the hospital, maybe.
Another committee assignment for you.
I can't.
I don't think you want that.
I can't perform miracles.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything else for the board, Mr. Slater?
No, again, other than, there are a lot of people in town who done a lot of work, Paul Riccardi's at just about every meeting. He's at meetings I'm not at. And I also want to mention some other people who meet on a regular basis. We have a building commissioner, Gary Pelletier. We have Deputy Chief Cody, Captain Campilio from the fire department. They meet with the project team on a regular basis to make sure that issues don't become issues. So I want to thank them also.
Great.
Mr. Chin, one
Yes,
question.
Mr. Sad.
Mr. Slater, where is the snack shack? Where's it located? Is it on the,
The snack shack
are we putting provisions
is,
for plumbing and electrical in that?
that's being taken care of.
All right, as long as it's taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, it's sort of like over here. We'll be over here someplace, in
The opposite,
that area, so.
the opposite end of the field from where it was though.
Yeah, it's gonna be, opposite the field, sort of like
Okay,
over there.
perfect, thank
Plus
you.
or
Yeah,
minus.
the plumbing, all that,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is being laid down.
In fact, that's probably been the most contentious thing we've had during the project is the orientation of the concession stand.
Yeah,
so.
that's important to those Pop Warner and soccer folks.
Yep,
It's a big fundraiser for them.
Yeah.
yep,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being here.
thank you.
Take care, Alan. Okay. All right, next up, William O'Donnell, the Register of Deeds for Norfolk County. Thank you so much. We're glad you got here safely. Mr. Slater was happy to trade slots with you. So,
No,
the floor is yours.
sure, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank Tony Mizuko for inviting me tonight. He said that you as a board were looking to get information from various local officials, and I appreciate your time and being here. As Register of Deeds, I have a great staff, and we run the Registry of Deeds down at 649 High Street in Dedham. It's probably an arm of government many people don't know about, but when you think about it, the biggest asset we have is our homes. So I just direct people that are watching tonight to go to our website, www.norfolkdeeds.org. There's great information there. For instance, if someone wants to take advantage of the Homestead Act to protect their home, by training, I'm an attorney, you've talked to 10 different attorneys, you get 10 different opinions on things, but 9.9 out of 10 would say you should have a homestead protecting your home. We have documents, a lot of great history in Norfolk County, 4 presidents with records at the Norfolk Registry of Deeds. So our documents are back to 1793. We try to bring the registry's records into people's homes and businesses. So if you go online again at www.norfolkdeeds.org, you can do research. You might want to do research on your real estate records. Other people are getting into genealogical research. Or you just might want to check, if you're lucky enough to pay off a mortgage, you want to make sure that discharge gets recorded. You can, go online and do that. You're also welcome to come down to 649 High Street. The registry has been in Dedham since 1793. It's across from the Gold Dome, Norfolk Superior Court. We do have a customer service center. My dad climbed poles for the Edison, and we've modernized the registry, but he used to say, a lot of people don't really care about computers or know anything about computers, so if you call our customer service center, 781-461-6101, if you need any help, you'll get it. People may want to take advantage of our anti-fraud consumer notification service. The FBI says the fastest growing white-collar crime is property and deed fraud. And how this works, as a matter of fact, ironically, I got an email today. I've signed up. It sends you an email if any version of William O'Donnell gets recorded at the registry. Tonight it was William M. O'Donnell. It's not me, I'm William Patrick O'Donnell. Again, we haven't prevented the fraud, but when I got that notice and I looked up the document, it might be a time when I say, wait a minute, that's not a deed I signed or my wife signed, or it might be a mortgage, we didn't sign that. Now, we didn't prevent the fraud. I want to make that clear to the viewers, but we have links to the law enforcement, but it at least gets you on track to deal with it right away. So I think it's a good service. It's a free service. We were the first registry in Massachusetts to do it, and other registries are now putting it in there. And we did it long before this. These private groups you see on TV that people pay money for. This is a free service in Norfolk County. I want to thank, there was a lot of Norwood connections this past year. I want to thank the Council on Aging. They had us out there to speak, Kerry McCarthy and Nancy Kelleher. And, we bring a staff, so if people need copies of their deeds, they want to check if their mortgages have been paid off. But more importantly, they know it's been paid off, but the discharge that tells the world it's been paid off, it's been recorded. Some people have questions. They say, gee, I can't remember if I have a homestead recorded. So it was great to be up at the senior center and dealing with the folks there. I want to thank Mike Rosen, actually, and Lee Leach. And you can see in the green folder, I do have some information on the Consumer Preservation Act, but Two of the books that we've done, one was a veterans book and one was the Norwood 150th. It was a great invention to do that. But some producer saw the Norwood book and wanted to go up, and Mike was great about making arrangements to go up, and again, it got an award in Brooklyn, New York. It was a Hometown Media Award. It came first place, so this little snippet about Norwood Town Hall. And he actually went over to the Norwood Theater as well. So it goes around the county. But again, good recognition, and some of it goes back to our History Comes Alive project. From 1793 to 1900, they hand wrote all the documents. So we transcribed over 450,000 documents. So when you go online, you can see the written version, but you can hit a button and get the typed version. And out of that, all kinds of history comes about. And you can see the Veterans book, for instance, Colonel Lee, was in the Veterans book. And speaking of the veterans, we did a ceremony. The Massachusetts Secretary of Veterans Affairs, John Santiago, spoke at the Registry of Deeds on November 8th. But we had, I got to thank the people from Norwood. Norwood was well represented. First of all, the Madrigals sang. They're a credit to the school, but they're a credit to the town. The young students did a wonderful job. And Jennifer Hartnett, their leader, just fantastic, great reviews. Teddy Mountainhill, of course, does so much locally here for the veterans, but he came down and led the Norfolk County Sheriff's Department in the posting of colors. So we're very fortunate to have Norwood well represented on things we do at the registry. And lastly, you have a representative to the advisory board. There's always been strong representatives from Norwood. It goes back to Gary Lee, and Tom Riolo, and Helen Donahue's been a wonderful representative, not just for Norwood, but she's been so supportive of the modernization initiatives at the registry. When I got there, there was, it was a while ago, my motto was, it's time for a change, but now that you're older, experience matters. But there was literally a year's worth of mail sitting there, and there was no internet land record research. There was no electronic recording. That's a new thing. And all these modernization initiatives, I want to thank you for supporting them and supporting the registry. And it all came to fruition. No one had a handbook during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, our registry was operational every workday, and it was because of a lot of the modernization initiatives. So I want to thank Helen for all the support she's given to me personally, but also to the whole concept of modernizing the Registry of Deeds. And if anyone has any questions, I know in the letter, that was a letter from February of last year. All documents get assessed for under the Community Preservation Act. And you can see, again, 2022 was probably busier than it's been now, and I'm sure the numbers won't be as high as it is there. But I just like to show this is the money that gets raised on Norwood documents. It goes to the Department of Revenue and eventually comes back for the projects that the Community Preservation Act and your board all get together and put forth here in Norwood. But that's just one of the things we do. We collect the revenues and it goes to the Department of Revenue. And so just like to show that there. And if anyone has any questions, I again appreciate the opportunity. It's good to, as I say, broadcast what we do at the registry. And again, if anyone has any questions out there, please contact us or email me directly at registerodonnell@norfolkdeeds.org, and we'll try to help you out.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll open it up to the board. Mr. Stead.
Mr. O'Donnell, congratulations, great job over there. I've used your services quite a bit, and you guys got a top-notch professional crew. Second, if somebody in the realm of these things you see on TV for the older folks and people that are being scammed, if they put it in a trust, a couple, if they buy a house, put it right immediately into a trust, is that harder to attack for the scammers versus just Michael P. Sad or something like that?
No, according to the FBI, it's not whether it's in a trust or in a deed. The trust's a little harder to break, but it's the forgery of the documents. Again, I think people put things in trust. I always tell people go to either legal counsel or elder affairs, people put in trust to protect against Medicaid, the nursing home issues. So I don't think, it might be a little harder to crack a trust, but I think the whole idea is fraud's taking place. I mean, think about it, they're doing it to mortgages, they set it up. So, again, I haven't seen it in Norfolk County, but it's happened in California, it's happened in Chicago, it's happened in Philadelphia, so it's only a matter of time before it comes here. But I want to, give everybody consolation. Massachusetts does have a state statute that if a document gets recorded that's fraudulent, it doesn't give good title. You still have issues you got to deal with, but people should know that the state legislature put something in place that fraudulent deed does not give good title. Of course, the person who might have bought it's got issues, but so I just want people to know that at least the state legislature has protections for that.
Good, thanks.
That's good Hoya training. How's your girls' hockey team doing?
They're doing good. We battled Allie McDonough, who played for Norwood, was playing for Holy Cross the other night. So
Good.
we're 10-2. We're getting
Congratulations,
there.
Coach.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Ms. Grove?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so excited that you're here, and I just have to commend again all the work that goes into these publications, because it really just helps kind of bring these pieces of history alive in a way that, it puts it into context of how something you're doing right now that might seem a little mundane, sometime in the future could be very significant to someone. And these are ways that they get captured, and you can look back and all the work that's gone into this one. And I'm a big fan. I've been reading these diligently. I didn't grow up here, so for me this is really exciting, because you get a level of detail that, somebody from out of state like me can kind of catch up on the history,
Well, it was a labor of love. I mean, just how Norwood, the name came about, and some of the people, as we said, there were historical people in that book, and then there were the characters in Norwood, from Sales Wall, who was a legendary coach here, or Richie Evans. So we tried to, just give a flavor for Norwood. But Norwood's always been about the people that grew up here, I really enjoyed doing the book. Thank you.
And I'm also very appreciative of the information about the property deed fraud. This is a topic that we've been looking at on the anti-scam task force as well. And so there are many columns of fraudulent activity that we're tracking and sort of watching what the trends are. And so being able to give people a resource, especially free resources, to try to get in front of that's going to be really important. So very appreciative of that as well.
Sure, reach out anytime, and again, it's a free service, and I know some people just don't like the computer, but to me it's a small, that's how we send the email out, but they can call our customer service center. If they get the email and they aren't comfortable in going online to check in the document, they can call our customer service center and we can walk them through.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Plasko?
I just want to say hi to an old friend, nice to see you.
Nice to
Happy
see
to have you here.
Thank you.
Information's nice, and I know firsthand that the registry, under your guidance, has come a long way from the old days. And we always like to see any aspect of our government improving. The registry is certainly Norfolk County top notch, so thank you for all the work.
Thank you, Mr. Plasko.
Great. Mr. Foley?
Welcome, Mr. Thank you for all the information, and also thank you for not quizzing us to name the 4 presidents who were born in Norfolk County. Appreciate that.
You probably know the answer.
Thank you. Thank you for including the letter to the Norwood Community Preservation Committee regarding the surcharges that have been collected by our office in support of our Community Preservation Committee projects, just under $185,000 in calendar year '22. That coupled with the money raised to the community preservation revenue stream, it's got so many great projects that without the CPC running those projects and running the process they do, I think may not get onto our operating budget, but they are well supported through what the taxpayers are contributing plus what the county is contributing, and I just appreciate your updates and telling us just what the revenue stream has been and explaining to us how it works. as well as all the other information that you've given us tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll be getting the 23 numbers, and I know I saw you on the trails, you know, for the January 1st hike, and it brought back memories with Mr. Sad clearing out the Hawes way back. But hopefully, you know, it's great that you can leverage that thing to, you know, those revenues to do projects.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Donnelly. Just reiterate the comments of my colleagues, but as a member of the CPC committee that, you know, we're the ones that look at these projects and ultimately make recommendations to move them forward. You know, it's such a great thing to be able to do that. And I know that sales are down. It's probably not going to be as much money next year, but, you know, I think we've been really wise with our projects and our money. So, you know, you've entrusted us to make these decisions, and we appreciate it. Also, I'd just like to say that I see you at all the events in Norwood. I think you have a very good presence in town, and you're always available, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Very much appreciated.
Anything else?
No, thank you. Again, thanks for your time, and enjoy the evening.
Yes, thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thanks for
be
coming
well.
in.
A healthy new year.
Same to you.
Talk to you soon, pal.
Thank you.
Great, okay. We'll hit up some agenda items, and then we have 7:15 appointments, so I will go back to the beginning. Item number 1, warrant signature update, submitting notification of reviewed and approved warrant reports signed by the board's representative. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion to file made by Ms. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Donnelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item number 2, meeting minutes for approval of the board, submitting meeting minutes for January 9th, 2024.
Motion to. Aye.
Well, I'm going to
Motion
give
to
it
approve.
to Ms. Grow.
And I.
Motion approved, made by Ms. Grow, seconded by Mr. Donnelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. We will move on to new business, get some stuff done until 7:15. So, appointment as constable, request to continue the appointment of Julia Farrar as constable with a term expiring in April of 2027.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Sad, seconded by Mr. Plasko. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. I'm going to skip item 4.2 for now, Mr. Donnelly, if that makes sense, and probably 4.3 as well. We will go to item 4.4, artwork along the Germany Brook Trail. Submitting request to paint the concrete blocks along the walking trail between Father Max and the Willett School. The artwork painted on these blocks will be wellness and themed and will promote a positive and healthy community environment. And this is coming from Impact Norwood.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Motion to approve the request made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow.
I
On the
have a
motion?
question on the motion. The objects that they're painting, is there ever a time where those objects need to be disturbed for any sort of, you know, maintenance or any kind of standard activities?
Possibly.
Rarely?
Yeah.
But the folks that submitted are aware of that possibility?
Correct.
Okay, excellent.
Right, and you had made a recommendation to approve based on, okay. But you're asking, Ms. Grow, if this work would be short-lived for some reason, is that sort of?
Yeah, or essentially if they, you know, if they invest, you know, art being what art is, there's a lot of, you know, emotional work that goes into it, and if you sort of do your art and then there's gonna be a, you know, a scuff or something from, just making sure that they sort of understand, it's like you're painting an object
Yeah.
that, you know, it's not completely untouched at
Yeah.
all times. It
Yep.
could get touched, but as long as they went into it with that understanding, then absolutely, it's great.
Great. So a motion made, seconded by Mr. Plasko. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.5, Car Wash, Norwood Parents Music Association, submitting request to hold a car wash on Saturday, May 11th, 2024, from 8:30 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the municipal parking lot.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Motion to approve the request made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.6, Car Wash, Norwood High School, Girls Varsity Hockey, submitting request to hold a car wash on Saturday, May 25th, 2024, from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the municipal lot.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Sad, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.7, Town Common request Neponsit River House. Neponsit River House submitting a request to use the Town Common for an event to raise awareness with regard to mental health during Mental Health Awareness Month. The event would take place on Thursday, May 16th, 2024, from 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. This is a repeat of a successful event that was held in May of 2023.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Motion made by Mr. Donnelly. Did you have on the motion?
I was gonna make the motion, but I'll second it.
Okay.
But on the motion.
Yes, sir, Mr.
I
Plasko.
just note that they've indicated food, and we require that they check in with the Board of Health and comply with any requirements they might have, depending on exactly what their plans are.
Okay, excellent. Motion made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Mr. Plasko, with an emphasis on the applicant coordinating with the Board of Health because of the food elements to their event. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.8, Progress, Town Common Request, Progress Nord. Progress Nord submitting a request to use the Town Common for the annual Earth Day celebration. The event will take place on April 21st, 2024, from 10 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. with approximately 250 attendees expected.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Ms. Gross, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item,
Question?
yes, Mr.
I
Plasko.
just had two requests for the bandstand Town Common on two different application forms. One was dated 2019, the other 21. Do we know where people might be receiving this 19, and can we get it out of circulation if we
Good.
have any control over that?
Good catch. I did not catch that, I'm sorry. I would assume we want people to use the most recent version.
Correct.
Would it be on our website that it could be in two
Yeah,
places?
We'll double check what version is out there on the website.
Yeah, so the most recent one that, like indicated food where the 19 doesn't, was 7/20/21.
Yeah.
Or if there's anything newer than that, but one instead of two or three floating around would be helpful.
We'll double check. Sometimes what happens is folks do save a copy of an application.
Yeah, if
and
they've kept it
They
from
get a couple of them, and
previous years.
we've gotten some 10, 12 years old before. But we will double check that what we have out there is the most
Yeah,
updated
because
form.
the next one is also the 19th, the older one.
Some people download it, print it, save it, fill it
Yeah,
out, but we'll make sure what's on the website's the most updated.
okay. I think we can work with you, Christine, too, to encourage people to, if you see one come in that's a little later. Good catch, Mr. Plasko. Still have to vote on it, I believe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.9, Town Common Request, Progress Nord. Progress Nord submitting a request to use the Town Common for the annual Pride Picnic. The event will take place on Saturday, June 1st, 2024, from 2:30 p.m. until 5:30 p.m., with approximately 100 attendees expected.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Motion to approve the request made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.10, Town Common Request, Juneteenth. Jeffrey Baguma submitting a request to use the Town Common for the annual Juneteenth event to take place on Saturday, June 15th, 2024, from 12:30 p.m. until 3:30 p.m. with approximately 400 attendees expected, plus at least one dog. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Sad, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wolf.
Nice. Chair votes yes, unanimous. Item 4.11, one-day liquor permit, Hometown Arcade. Hometown Arcade located at 61 Endicott Street, Building 26A, submitting request for a one-day liquor permit for a Cottage Street School Adult Night Out event on Saturday, January 27th, 2024, from 7 p.m. until 11 p.m. with approximately 60 guests expected. Mr. Plasko.
Make a motion to approve the application as made out.
Motion to approve made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.12, one-day liquor permit, Hometown Arcade, located at 61 Endicott Street, Building 26A, submitting a request for a one-day liquor permit for Dedham Country Day School Staff Day event on Monday, January 29th, 2024, from 2 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. with approximately 70 guests expected.
Make a motion.
Motion approved made by Mr. Sad, seconded by Mr. Donnelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Okay. Let's see, there's a little glare in the clock. I can't really see it, I'm sorry.
10 after?
7:11, okay. Yeah, we can go to memoranda. If there's anything in particular that people on the board would like to bring up?
Motion to file. 1 through 7, 5, 1 through 7.
Motion to file items 5.1 through 5.7 made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay. Great. So we'll have the appointment at 7:15.
We can go for a few minutes if you want.
Yeah, do you want to give your update now?
Sure.
Great.
Just a couple things, Mr. Chairman. One, I'm passing out a summary of what's being titled the Municipal Empowerment Act. The governor has submitted this bill to the legislature. Something similar was done about 8 years ago when Charlie Baker came in. They called it municipal modernization. Now we're calling it municipal empowerment. But I handed it to the board to take a look through as you have time and look at some of these provisions would have a positive impact on the town and our operations and sort of the fiscal health. The bill has just been submitted. It has not obviously gone through the legislature. It does extend permanently things like remote meetings. I don't believe it has the requirement that they be required, which was something floating around last year. It excuse me. It extends outdoor dining and the ability for outdoor dining and cocktails to go on a permanent basis. There's a couple of local revenue enhancements, potential changes to excise tax, meals tax, and hotels tax, as well as a number of other municipal modernization efforts or other items. I encourage you to read through it. If you have any questions, let me know. I do anticipate the legislature to take it up at some point. I don't know in what form it will finalize, but some of these will have a positive impact and will lead to future town meeting articles and discussions among the board and certainly among the community. The governor did announce at the MMA conference this past weekend, we're anticipating about a 3% increase in unrestricted general government aid and the continuation of the Student Opportunities Act, which should have a positive impact on this year's state aid numbers. We're going to get up an outdated budget balancing sheet as soon as we have those numbers. Where the governor's getting all the money from, I'm not sure, but that is luckily above my pay grade to figure that out, but it looks like it'll be a positive year on that front. Knock on wood. It is still just a proposal. And then one other, I just want to talk for a moment about the library and give particular kudos to Clayton Cheever, the director of the library, and the staff. We started about 6 or 7 years ago when there's extreme cold or warm, opening different facilities up as warming and cooling shelters. We hadn't really done it before, and we sort of fumbled our way through seeing what was best for the community. Certainly the Civic has always served as our traditional shelter. We would sort of open that up, but there's not much to do there on a day when it's otherwise not open. We would open the senior center, and what Kerry found at the senior center is non-seniors wouldn't go there. So there wasn't really as much of a need. She's in touch with obviously a lot of her seniors that have a need, and we didn't want to have to open 2 facilities. So a couple years ago, we started experimenting with, let's open the library and see how that works. And our ability to do so and to rally the staff, and Clayton and his team volunteered a lot of time this weekend, did a great job. We opened extended hours. We stayed open a little late Friday and did 9 to 9 Saturday and Sunday instead of the normal 12 to 6 and 1 to 4. 250 people came in during those extended hours, which is quite a high number for us. And we're just happy that this seems to be working out. It's great for the library. Clayton and his team, I believe Clayton even missed an anniversary surprise dinner that he was supposed to go to because he committed to doing it before finding out he was the victim of a surprise dinner, depending on how you look at such things. So kudos to him for putting the time in, but it's become a source of comfort for a number of people and is just something we're able to provide a couple times a year during these extreme weather events. But they've done a fantastic job, and that certainly goes to show that it's at that level of visitation above and beyond the normal library visitation, that it's working really well.
That's great, thank you.
And one just on it.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Empowerment is just what they'd like to see. They're gonna file these bills.
The governor has filed this.
We can't act on any of these.
Correct, nothing yet. The governor has filed it. The legislature still has to go through it. No idea what's going to
Ready
be
to
done.
jump on a couple.
You did? Yeah. So was I. And as every time this something like this comes out, there's several things that towns say, thank God they're finally letting us do this. Other times you look at things and you say, well, we've done this for 30 years, so I don't know why they need to tell us to do it now. And just one sad note, since I don't know if I'll read back, tomorrow marks 3 years since Bernie Cooper passed away.
Thank you.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Donnelly had a question.
On the Municipal Empowerment Act, I imagine, given the direction of the legislation, this is something that the Mass Municipal Association will lobby for or propose.
Absolutely.
And as it proceeds through legislature, once we've had an opportunity to peruse and understand it, whether the board may not want to just also provide its own insights to Representative Rogers and Senator Rush as the bill proceeds to the legislature.
I think that would be helpful once you have a chance to sort of digest everything that's in there.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Grow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the topic of the libraries, the warming center, for the folks that did come out, do we have an understanding of sort of the motivation? Was it people that, literally just their heating is failing them, or was it people that just, it was open later and they're like, you know what, I want to go here tonight?
There's a little bit of the, oh, it's open, let's go see it, and we
Yeah.
see that everywhere. Again, we're not able to, it's not a shelter per se. We're providing some comfort, maybe if people's heat doesn't work that well, if they can't turn it up beyond a certain point. A lot of other activities get closed or canceled.
Yeah.
So it provides a comfort. I think it provides some sort of provides more of a psychological comfort in some time. We try to let folks, when they come in, just use the library and sort of be, but I would say it's a mix of all of the above.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Mizuko. Our 7:15 appointment, if they are ready.
They're ready.
Okay.
Well, one's ready.
Okay. Welcome, Ms. Dixon, and members of the planning board. Thank you so much for being here. We know you are here to talk about the MBTA Communities Act. The floor is yours if you'd like to introduce your colleagues. Go right ahead, and then it's yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having us here to be able to discuss our proposed articles with you. Members of the planning board tonight, Ernie Patrickowski, who also served on the MBTA Communities Task Force, Brian Hatchie, the current chair of the planning board, Joe Sheehan, and Rob Bamber. Debbie Homewood's out of town and was unable to join us tonight.
Okay. Great.
So I have a presentation just to kind of introduce this article and go through the process and how we arrived at this place. Who's the slide master? Is that you?
Yep.
Okay. So the task force was assembled by the planning board. Ernie served as chair. We had representatives from the zoning board and a handful of ex officio members of town staff, as well as a handful of residents at large who worked for the last year and a half and organized our approach to this. So I give a lot of credit to them. This was a very active group. They did a lot of heavy lifting. It was not simply advisory. It was a roll up your sleeves kind of group of people that came together and really drove the public participation in particular. So just very briefly, I know you all, I think, are experts at this by now, but the new Section 3A law was a amendment to the Zoning Act that was passed by the state legislature a couple of years ago. It requires communities like ours that have MBTA access in the form of the commuter rail or the subway, or are adjacent to towns that have those things, to create a zoning district where multifamily housing could be permitted by right without discretionary approval processes like special permits. It requires a certain amount of density, 15 units an acre. It must be of reasonable size, which for Norwood was established to be 50 acres or more. It must have housing that, proposed zoning for housing that is suitable for families, no age restrictions, and a certain percentage of all of that needed to be within a half mile of the transit station. Next. 3A was passed for a variety of reasons, but the kind of driving force behind this was our housing crisis, which is worsening and affecting more and more people. A lot of communities, unlike Norwood, have not historically had diverse patterns of housing development where you have more affordable options, rentals, multifamily housing complexes, and different entry points on the market. So as a result of that, decades of underproducing housing has pushed out a lot of people who can't afford to live in the eastern part of the state anymore. It's starting to threaten our economy as young workers are leaving and pursuing lower costs of living areas, older folks who are hoping to downsize, just a limited housing, a portfolio of housing options. So the task force's process first started with submitting an action plan to the state. You may recall being a part of that. The action plan was really just an initial submission of our intent to comply with the law and set forth a timeline for coming into compliance. We are in interim compliance right now with the law. We have until the end of December of this year to pass our proposed zoning district. Tony, would you mind moving to the next slide? Just to show you where we are here. We submitted the action plan in January. The task force really wanted this process to be driven by public input. So that was kind of like the start and the end of this. It was a robust public education campaign trying to just make people aware of this and engage folks to learn more about it. And then over the summer, there was a series of 6 events that were discussion-led. So opportunities for more meaningful participation where attendees could come and not just hear, me or Ernie or members of the task force or planning board talk about it, but rather for us to listen and encourage people to really share their thoughts and views on the housing needs in Norwood and how we could best comply with this law in a way that makes sense for the town. Those kind of concluded over the summer. And then in the fall, we worked, into the identifying our districts, picking the geographic locations, and drafting the bylaw itself. Planning board held informal discussions at 3 of its public meetings in the fall. I submitted to the state the draft language that's in the article for pre-approval. There's a process where you can submit all of it, and they can give you a determination that it would comply with the law if town meeting passes it. I'm hoping to receive that response in time for town meeting. It does take them some time to work through it, but the idea being town meeting will be prepared to vote on something that they know and have confidence would satisfy and come into compliance with the law. So that was submitted in December. And then this kind of final wave is town meeting approval. So that's where we're at here. We've submitted the article to the Board of Selectmen for entry on the March 21st special town meeting warrant. And we're about to engage in a series of a second wave of public engagement, really kind of educating on what this bylaw is, what it does, what it hopes to accomplish, what it's not, and how it responds to the needs that we heard from the public in the first phase of the process. Next slide. Over 70 people participated in our engagement sessions. These were divided into small groups, led through a series of discussion prompts. Groups talked about the parts of Norwood that they loved the most, the housing needs they felt were unmet in the community. They shared their stories about personal experiences with housing in Norwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything in between. Participants kind of were representative of all walks of life. We had young, old, we had members of the business community, we had one event that was co-sponsored with the Commission on Disability, kind of giving voice to those particular needs. And most people who attended had lived in their lifetimes in a variety of different styles of housing, many including multifamily housing and rentals. Even though every voice was different and there were kind of unique views, there were some areas of consensus that emerged. These are some copies of some of the small group kind of notes. Every small group had a secretary or a bookkeeper who kept track of the group's views. Folks who participated in those small group discussions shared deep and meaningful, concerns about the future of housing in Norwood. People were worried about the impacts that future development would have. Traffic, right? Worries about loss of open space, change of neighborhood character. There was a lot of concern, about any development, right? Worrying about that change. Will it change the Norwood that I've always known and love right now? What does that future Norwood look like? We had a lot of responses from people who were worried about young people in town. There was a lot of sadness, I think, shared that younger people can't afford to return as adults who grew up in Norwood. That was a theme that we heard. Everyone, I feel like, expressed a strong interest in staying in Norwood, particularly as they age, which makes sense because it's a great place to live. But there was a fair amount of worry expressed among groups that current housing could be too large and unaffordable, or inaccessible if they were to get to a stage in life where they had mobility challenges. There was a lot of, well, where would I live if something happened? That was a theme that emerged. There was a lot of sentiments about gratitude that they live in Norwood, and there were a lot of folks that kind of wondered, if I were starting over today, would I be able to afford a place here? Could I call this home? Next slide. We also held a survey. Over 100 participants responded to this survey. It was a diverse group of respondents, answering a variety of questions about their current housing situation, their current housing affordability, their needs, geographic areas that were identified as being suitable for more development. Next slide. Just a couple of representative questions about that. There was consensus here that Norwood doesn't have enough affordable housing. Affordability was a theme from all of the events, small group discussions and the survey. Most people said we don't have enough affordable housing, and even the affordable housing we have is not affordable. The rent is just too darn high. It's something we heard, I think, over and over and over again. Next slide, please. Hard to read, I apologize, but this is a question about where people would support increased housing density. There were a couple of suggestions at the top, and then the ability for people to add their own. In general, most people preferred to see increased housing density in the areas around all 3 train stations. Route 1 was kind of a runner-up to that. Next slide. So the community priorities that emerged, the Norwood love was strong. People really love the lists about what they love about this town were long, right? Affordable tax rate, public services like the senior center and the library, walkability, a really vibrant, active downtown with things to do and places to go, our municipal electric and broadband, strong sense of community in our neighborhoods. And the general agreement was like, we really want to preserve those parts about Norwood that are so great. In a perfect Norwood, people thought that housing options would include more options for seniors and people with disabilities, and more affordable units across the board for everyone in any part of town, right? A priority for walkable housing kind of emerged, both as a means of access for people maybe who can't or choose not to drive or can't afford to drive, but also support for, keeping those vibrant town centers, alive. There was support for green space and sustainable buildings when possible. Sustainable development, was a theme that emerged as well. And again, in addition to that preservation part, which is really crucial to note. Next slide, please. So the overlay district that is proposed in the article before you, which I believe you all have a copy of, and a copy of this map as well, is called the MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District, or the MCMOD.
I don't like it.
It's to have 3 sub-districts, and each of them have distinct dimensional requirements that kind of reflect the unique nature of the neighborhood where each of those is located. There are the 3 commuter rail stations, Windsor Gardens, Norwood Central, and Norwood Depot. The public feedback, again, going back to what we heard, was clear that this increased density should be near the transit, the commercial uses, and the pedestrian-friendly areas. People really felt strongly that the single-family neighborhoods should stay as they are, and that was an important part of Norwood that they wanted to preserve. The task force identified these districts within the half-mile zones that contain parcels that are mostly zoned manufacturing as the base, parcels that are underutilized or vacant, manufacturing parcels where the land use is inconsistent with nearby land uses, meaning a factory next to a single-family home. Multifamily housing can be a better transitional buffer for something like that, where you have a very industrial use next to a residential use. It can kind of graduate that transition between those uses and increase that compatibility. And they also identified parcels that are currently being used as multifamily housing. And that's important to note because that promotes consistency and compliance with the bylaw. It puts multifamily housing in a neighborhood where there's already multifamily housing. Again, preserving our existing neighborhoods and enforcing kind of compatible uses, encouraging compatible uses in neighborhoods where it's already there. Next slide. So kind of all of these, this is how we've incorporated the public input into the proposed zoning. And I, won't read through everything in detail, but in general, we heard from folks, opportunities for available housing are too low. There's just not enough rental housing to meet the demand, especially affordable housing. So the response here is that the proposed zoning allows for a range of housing redevelopment that's actually buildable. We've not approached a strategy where no redevelopment will take place. We probably could have done that and still come into compliance with the law, but the clear message that we heard was, if this is a state mandate that we have to create this zoning and we have to come into compliance with this law, let's draft a bylaw that works for us and encourages some reinvestment in parts of town that could benefit from that. That are underutilized, that aren't producing a lot of tax revenue.
And that was sort of the lens that we used initially, the group,
Yeah.
the task force was saying, this is how we're going to move forward.
This is how we're going to move forward. Let's make it work for us. Let's see some benefit. We heard a lot about affordability, so the proposed bylaw does include an inclusionary zoning requirement where a certain percentage of every new development that would occur as a result of this needed to have either 10 or 20% affordable housing. Additionally, there's a bonus incentive for any developers that want to add an additional 5% at a lower income threshold, proposing more deeply affordable housing to households with lower incomes. We've heard concerns about traffic. So our proposed zoning, instead of the required 90%, is 100% within that half-mile radius of the transit stations. And the parking requirements that are proposed are designed to really encourage and attract residents who are not car dependent to lessen that impact of traffic on our roads. We heard a lot about accessibility. The housing stock in Norwood is older. There's a lot of walk-ups and triple-deckers in South Norwood, elsewhere in town, that don't necessarily have accessible access for people maybe with mobility issues. And so it was a deliberate decision to try to encourage building height in certain areas that are mid-rises. That triggers 3 stories, triggers building code and AAB requirements that require things like elevators. And a requirement that a certain number of the units in a building be fully accessible with the wider doorways and the roll-in showers and all of those options. Scale to neighborhood, we talked about that a little bit. New housing should be integrated into neighborhoods that are compatible with multifamily housing. And the building heights that were selected for this and the dimensional requirements, the locations, are all designed not to create buildings that are taller than what's there, but kind of fit in with the existing built infrastructure. Next slide. Open space was a priority that we heard a lot about. So the bylaw requires, in most cases, a bump, an increase in the open space. There's also incentives for more open space in the form of underground parking, and a one-for-one replacement of that surface parking area with open space, or improved stormwater infrastructure with 40% open space. And sustainable development. There's design requirements here for bike storage, pedestrian access to the street, sidewalk access, more open space, and again, incentives for improvements on stormwater management design. So I feel confident. This district was designed from start to finish based on feedback we've received from the public. Our public outreach consumed, most of the last year. It was well attended and participated by various members of our community from all walks of life. I feel really proud of what the task force accomplished here. It was a tremendous undertaking, and the members of the public who participated are also to be commended for their contributions to this. I think this is a strategic, middle-of-the-line proposal that really tries to be thoughtful about potential development, encouraging, through our zoning, redevelopment in ways that suits the needs of Norwood residents, while not representing any huge, fundamental changes to the parts of our community that are what make it a great place to live. So with that, I will kind of ask if you have any questions. Ernie, as a planning board member and task force member, or I can answer for you. Would love the opportunity to do that.
Great, thank you, Ms. Dixon. Before we open up, Ernie, any comments?
Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. Just, I think it's a great bylaw that's written, and I think that commend Sarah, who put an awful lot of time and effort into this and writing it, and I think it works. I really do for Norwood. And now I understand, I understand there's a lot of sentiment in Norwood about no more apartments. You see it all the time. My thing is, where do you want Norwood to go? And I think the task force felt that way too. If we're going to do this, it's a state mandate. This is something we didn't bring on ourselves, it was put on us, but we're going to make it work for Norwood. And do we want to leave Norwood the way it is? Do we want to have the areas that we chose for the districts, the 3 districts, I think really work. They're right for redevelopment. I think that they're not going to have virtually no impact on any residential neighborhoods. I think it's well thought out, well written. I just think it works. And I understand people are gonna say no more apartments or whatever. And the thing that we gotta remember is, yes, there will be some action on this. If town meeting passes this, there will be some action. Developers will find some spots and develop. But this is not a mandate to build. This is a mandate to rezone. This is a mandate to put another tool in somebody's toolbox. It is not a mandate to build. No one is going to put a gun in Norwood's head and say, you have to build all these apartments. They have to be built. They do not. But the option is there, like I said before, there's another tool in the toolbox for someone in this thing. And I have some disagreements with the state, I think on the affordability, they're 10%. I thought it should have been a lot higher, especially with the governor's new mandate on housing that she's put forward. But it is what it is, and I think that I think it's a good bylaw. I think it's a good, solid program, and I support it, as did the planning board.
Great, thank you, and thanks for chairing the task force. It was a good group, but
It was a good group. It was a good group.
You did a good job.
Smart people, smarter than me, and that's what you know.
That's fine. But before I open it up to you, I just would like to say, Ms. Dixon, I know out of the 177 or so communities that were tasked with this, a vast majority, did hire a consultant to do all this work, and I know that you and your office did this work to get to the point that we are today. So, regardless of what happens, the outcome, I appreciate that. So, thank you. We will open it up to the board, unless anyone else from the planning board that is here wants to chime in before it opens up.
Well, I'd certainly like to thank Sarah for a very comprehensive presentation, all the work she's done, and the task force for all their efforts. Speaking for the board, just as a member, I certainly support this. I believe that it was extremely well thought out, and there's nothing more really to add to what Ernie and Sarah have said, but I certainly support it. And I believe that if anybody had observed the meetings, there was a great deal of agreement along the way. I mean, there was some work that it took to refine what we ultimately supported, but I believe the board is unified here in terms of what we've presented, and certainly encourage the board to adopt.
Great, thanks. Joe, Rob?
I echo those sentiments. I don't want to take any more of your time, but thanks to Sarah and Ernie and everyone who participated. I do think I love where it is. It's just the footprint with all that zoning, it just makes so much sense.
Mhm.
And they got it all within that 50 feet. I think that's great. Not everyone can do that.
Great, thanks. Good.
I'm good. I'm in agreement as well. I give my time for any questions.
Perfect. Great, thanks so much. Okay, Mr. Sad, you want to start off?
Well, buckle up. My question is this. We always hear about the other towns that we're compared to for our tax rate and anything else in town. We have 55% apartments in Norwood, and we have 3 T-stops. We're being severely punished. So my question is there any other town fighting this or not doing it as a mandate? Because I know we're going to get caught with people with attics, basements, garages for additional apartments. So the state's going to throw that on us next year. I mean, where do we stop in Norwood? And my question is, this proposed area, I know one's Windsor Gardens, and one, can you see what street it goes from? Is it Railroad Ave to Hoyle Street?
The Norwood Depot sub-district
This whole district, that's yelled out, proposed.
from Nahattan Street on Lennox, Nahattan.
Yep.
So that's the Rockland Trust Bank
Yep.
building. On that side of the street through Norwood Tire, the town's DPW property, the Lennox condominiums, and then it jogs over on Railroad and includes the crossings. That's the Norwood Depot sub-district. The Norwood Central sub-district, again, closer to the Norwood Central train station, that includes property from Avalon, and then continues on the railroad track side of Lennox, down to the bottom of Subway Hill where the train bridge is. It also includes a property on the other side of the tracks on East Hoyle across the street from the hospital.
So it's not 500, not half a mile from each train stop?
It is not. That would be 860 acres.
Okay.
And we only had to choose a minimum of 50 of those.
So we have 55% of our apartment stock already in place. We're a high-density little town. We're not meeting that requirement yet? I mean, why can't we just say, no, we don't want to do this, we got enough apartments?
Yeah, it's a valid question, and it's one that we heard, I think, fairly often from people who are participating. I think none of our current zoning complies with the bylaw, and that's less about the housing that's on the ground than what's in the zoning bylaw. Many properties are non-conforming, right? If you were to rebuild Norwood today, according to our standards, like our downtown would look completely different, South Norwood would look completely different. So there's a disconnect between the built environment and what zoning would allow for new development. But that said, I actually don't feel that Norwood is punished in any way with this law. In fact, I think we enjoy an advantage coming into compliance with 3A in communities where there's no multifamily housing and there are no neighborhoods anywhere that allow for it. They're going to pass this zoning and there will be a tremendous opportunity in the market to create multifamily housing. In Norwood, we have multifamily housing and we've strategically placed these districts in areas that have multifamily housing. So the market incentive to tear down Avalon and rebuild Avalon isn't there. Same thing with Norwood Crossings. That's constructed at a density that exceeds what's being proposed here. So there's no market incentive to take down the crossings and again, replace it with what?
And we've included those in these districts.
And we've included those in this district as a
Right.
way to kind of mitigate the potential impacts of this on actual construction activity afterwards. So I think we actually enjoy an edge there in that the resulting, development activity that occurs because of this zoning isn't going to represent like a fundamental shift in what our town looks like. It will in many others that haven't, to your point, taken on their fair share of multifamily housing.
And Sarah, how about the height now? What's the restriction on the height, 30 feet?
So the state is requiring us to do it in stories, which isn't how we do it locally. They've told us to account for 11 feet per story. So it's different in each district, but in Windsor Gardens, you're looking at 3-story buildings. Norwood Depot, you're looking at 4-story buildings. And at Norwood Central, it's 3-story buildings with a step-back requirement. And that one is sensitive to the single-family residential homes that are across the street on Lennox, trying to be sensitive to the experience that they would have with increased building height. There's a step-back requirement. So the front setback is 20 feet. That's where the building can start. And then at 40 feet is when you're allowed to go that extra floor to 4 feet. So it's three stories at 20 feet from the front line, and at 40 feet, it's 4 stories.
Similar to the downtown. What we
Yes.
did, similar to the downtown, what we did there. So it eliminates that, what they call the canyon effect.
Right.
And when you're on the street, it's not straight up,
Right,
it's
right up
stepped
in the
back.
area.
And again, you're abutting the train tracks, where the highest point of any building would be abutting the train tracks, not Lennox Street.
How about just point of information where this gentleman just came up a couple weeks ago for a hearing at Ambrose Press. He's got three stories in the front, 4 in the back, but the land slopes 10 feet from front to back. And how is that rule where you take the median average and that gets you up higher? Is that calculated in this type of equation?
So the way the building department calculates height is consistent through development across town. I believe it's calculated from grade, the average of grade.
Okay.
But that would be applied evenly for any property in town.
No, but you're going from 0 to 10, now you go 5 plus 4 stories. I mean, you're up there. That's what we're afraid of. I mean, the character of Noah is going to be gone, tremendously gone. These developers are going to come in here and just knock everything down and just build up. Because the affordability, as you know, for Boston housing is a 1-bedroom is up over $2,500, $2,800 right now. So you go into a 2 or 3 bedroom, you're at $4,000, $5,000. That's affordability, and people can't afford it.
Okay.
They're gonna come from the city back up to Norwood and push Norwood out to Plainville.
So to that point, Mr. Sad, I think that, from my perspective, the areas that we've chosen can handle that.
I hope so.
And there's no initial impact on any, real residential neighborhoods. And I look at towns, I happen to, for whatever reason, I drive through Mansfield Center. We always say, look what Walpole's doing, look what Dedham's doing. They've just energized their downtowns with their apartment buildings and condos. And I have the opportunity to go to Mansfield a lot now, and they've kind of done the same thing. And I believe if it's done right, in the right location, we can handle this and it'll be fine. And I think that the areas that have been selected, I mean, like Sarah said, it couldn't have lined up any better for Norwood. I mean, there are, I'm not going to say other towns, but there are other towns that are going to be some of the wealthier towns that don't allow it. They're going to have some sticker shock, or they're going to have some real shock value. I think that we're primed and situated for this.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, just to your point, Mr. Said, about, fighting it, it is law. I mean, it's law. There are some towns, I mean, in particular, if you read the newspaper, and I think Mr. Mizuko has a letter from the Attorney General in Milton, I believe, that passed the town meeting, but the town got enough signatures for a referendum and a vote. But I mean, it's, I think the implications of potential future funding being taken away from towns that don't move forward. And I'll let Mr. Mizuko expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, just for, it's not necessarily the funding that's a concern. The Attorney General did send a letter, which I've provided a copy to the board, to the town of Milton, stating really in no unclear terms, they must comply. There's no gray area where they can't comply. I believe if I could actually read from it, if you'll give me just a moment. As a matter of state law, compliance with the act is not optional, as we have clearly and consistently advised. My office, again, the Attorney General's office, will not hesitate to compel compliance with the MBTA Communities Act through legal action if necessary, should a municipality refuse to comply. We're also empowered to enforce state, federal fair housing laws which prohibit municipalities from maintaining zoning rules, yada, 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 yada. Rarely in my time have I seen such a clear letter from the Attorney General effectively stating, if you choose not to comply, the Attorney General is going to take you into court. And I don't see, because the letter earlier references, it passed the legislature something like 180 to 4. it's also important to remember that not that that's an idle threat from the Attorney General, we, as every other town in the Commonwealth, are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. Ultimately, all of our zoning laws, all of our bylaws are only allowed to exist because there's a state statute that allows them. So I don't think the legislature would ever take action against a town like Milton, but if we're concerned about can we just push back and no, as somebody who enjoys a good fight and has no problem thumbing his nose at the state, the Attorney General has clearly told us, or at least clearly stated to the town of Milton, you will not win this battle, and I would tend to believe the Attorney General on this. The sanctions on grant funding and whatnot is less compelling. There's a separate letter about that. But the Attorney General has said you must comply with the law, like it or not.
Mr. Chairman, I know I was informed there's a town out of western Massachusetts that went to court and won, and they said that the state can't tell a town what to do. So I don't know if we have to look into that.
Now, just to be clear, we only exist because the state allows municipalities to exist. There are some states that have independent charters, so the state ultimately has control. The state approves all of our zoning. So even if we pass something and it's legal, we want to just change the zone from commercial to residential, that ultimately does go to the Attorney General office for approval to make sure it's compliant with the state's law. By all means, the board can make whatever decision it wants in the planning board and town meeting. I just don't know if picking a fight with the Attorney General is a battle we can reasonably win, and I'm not opposed to lost causes, but I think out the gate you'd be looking at significant litigation costs with the AG that I just don't see how we could win.
I'm just saying, if you look into that case, if it is
I will
true,
absolutely look into
that's a big win for Norwood. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
I can answer that question. I think, Mr. Sad, if you think of Holden, the
Yeah.
town of Holden, okay, there's a group out there called the Central Mass Housing Alliance, I believe is the name of it. And they took the town of Holden to court because they hadn't filed
Their action.
their action plan. And so they're saying that the town of Holden is not going to be in compliance. It went to the Superior Court. Superior Court dismissed it on technicality or
They didn't have standing or something.
Yeah.
something like that.
They said the
It-
defendants didn't
it-
have standing.
So it's not that Holden won. The last line of the article is Holden still has to comply. It was a nonprofit group that took, it wasn't Holden versus the state of Massachusetts. But it did go to Massachusetts Superior Court and it was dismissed under technicality or procedurally, they dismissed it. So and the last line of the article is Holden, while this all gets sorted out, Holden still has to comply.
All right, that's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
I would need probably recommendations from council, but my concern, if we considered any kind of action, isn't if we won, it's if we lost. I think what would happen if you lost this type of action is that the state would then decide what the zoning is. They would come in, so we would lose all local input into the process. They wouldn't send it back and say, okay, take another whack at it. They would just take over. And do we want that?
All right.
David Sack.
Yeah, the threat to compel action based on the Fair Housing Act is a fairly significant one for, I mean, candidly, when the Attorney General usually writes us about something, there's enough masked in there that, you can't tell which way they're going. And not to say that I agree with the state's deciding to do this, but I think at least based on this letter to Milton, it's very clear the legislature has passed law, thou shalt comply with it.
Ms. Scribb?
Nothing from me, but other than it all looks great as far as I'm concerned. I've been following the stats. The state is losing population. And when we're talking about the cost of one-unit apartments, you try to get a unit here, it's $2,200 for a one-bedroom right now. I can't get my data scientists, I can't get my coders for my job in our town, and this used to be the place that they love to come. All these high-tech workers can't afford to work here with six-figure salaries, which is bonkers to me. So we gotta do something, because we can't do nothing.
Thank you, Ms. Scribb. I'm going to skip over to Mr. Donnelly and then Ms. Plaskow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I was struck looking at the conversation we just had regarding the notice to Milton from the Attorney General. I was struck by the differences in the two letters that Milton received, one from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which was rather tame and had information regarding the fact that Milton, should it not comply, faces the loss of various grant opportunities. And we were aware that is the case, and in some cases, perhaps, that's not a very heavy-handed penalty. But Mr. Mizuko quoted the Attorney General's office. I was struck by the tone, and your quote kind of reflects that. But at the beginning of that paragraph, it's also, just to continue, the Attorney General's office is entrusted with the enforcement of the Commonwealth's law, including the MBTA Communities Act. It's essential that government actors, be they statewide or local, adhere to the law, given that we demand no less from all within our respective jurisdictions. Milton, for example, does not hesitate to act when necessary to compel compliance with its bylaws. So this, in comparison to the letter from the executive office, is pretty heavy-handed in that, that is a compelling letter for I think communities that seek to evade or not comply with the law. I just have a couple questions, and Ms. Dixon, I beg your indulgence because you actually gave me a good bit of detail earlier in an earlier conversation. But so the law requires at least a density, a minimum of 15 units per acre. Could you explain to us but there's no maximum. There's no max. Could you explain to us how the build-out calculations account? I mean, my question would be, what does the developer need to be aware of from the new zoning in order to prepare a proposal with a specific unit per number per acre? What are the guidelines around doing that from a development standpoint?
Sure. So density in the form of a units per acre, format is often either duplicative or in contradiction to the rest of the dimensional controls that are applied. What does that mean? So the other dimensional controls include your setbacks, the distance of a structure from the side, rear, and front lot lines, the building height, requirements for open space, what percentage of the lot must be preserved for open space, parking, how much of that lot needs to be used for parking. All of those requirements really dictate what the size of the building is, what the building envelope is. Density, sometimes it doesn't comply with that building envelope. Very often a density figure will be well higher, than what the actual controls would allow in creating that building envelope. So I would say, the density that these dimensional requirements put forward is consistent with the development pattern that we have in these neighborhoods. The state's given us a compliance model calculator to use, where it calculates what the maximum density with our inputs would be. So, it's a spreadsheet I've put in. Okay, so we're allowing buildings that are 3 stories or 4 stories and these addresses. It applies all of our selected dimensional controls against the very land that we've selected, and kind of spits back out what that density would be. On average, the density units per acre is about 44 units per acre, which is considerably less than some developments like Avalon or Upland Woods have higher densities. It's about consistent with the Olivati building we like to use as an example. That has residential above and the restaurant on the ground floor. It's more consistent with that level of density. It's modest. We allow up to 32 units right now in the Central Business District, for example. So
dimensional requirements do provide a guidance to developers in a way for us to determine whether the units per acre really are extraordinarily excessive.
Yeah, and I would argue that it's actually a stronger enforcement of that. You could, in a building envelope, I suppose, create, more units if they're studios, but is that really what's best for the market? Not necessarily. So creating the building envelope and kind of allowing the developer and the market to dictate, the mix of bedroom sizes, I think can be a more appropriate way to actually meet the needs of the community.
That was the building, like I said, the building size, the envelope is really the determining factor on what they're going to put in there. Very similar to what we did on the Route 1 project is we allowed we build the building for you, kind of, take that approach. We let you build the building to our dimensions. What you do inside is totally up to you. I mean, there are some requirements here, but like Sarah said, I mean, you could go with all studio apartments or something and get a higher density, but it's really that building envelope that's not going to exceed, and that's what people drive by, that's what they see.
Yes.
And that's really what, you know, we look at something and say, that looks good, or, you know, that doesn't look good, or something.
Thank you, that's very helpful. The other question I had, I believe I have a pretty good understanding of this now. Early on, when 3A was first proposed, there was a lot of discussion around the inability of communities to consider existing stock of multifamily units in this law, but that apparently is not really the case. When we take the instance of Windsor Gardens, you can take a look at that zone and see that it does fit our hypothetical build-out. But how would a developer actually, you know, if a developer, how would that even be developed? What would a developer need to do to take Windsor Gardens zone and actually build something that is more consistent with our new zoning? Wouldn't that require basically the demolition of many of their units today and then rebuild to the specifications to the zone?
Yeah, so there's a modest lift in the density as proposed here than what's there. So should an owner of Windsor Gardens at some point want to make improvements to the buildings or replace some of the buildings as they age and become, you know, redundant, they could, you know, build a slightly taller building or put more units, you know, in the building. But again, the zoning, the law is about zoning. It's not a construction mandate. There's no requirement for production of actual units. So I think you're right, kind of early in our conversation, folks would say, well, why aren't we getting credit for the units that we already have? Compliance is about the rules, what we allow. What we would allow if this proposed article passes is a gentle lift on what's there, which provides some incentive, but certainly not a wholesale incentive to raise the property and
Sure.
build it completely out.
And to your earlier point, this would be an example of the fact that Norwood does have a large amount, a significant amount of existing multifamily structures is working to our advantage, so to
Yes,
speak.
so if we were, you know, a more rural community and that was all green space, completely undeveloped green space, you'd be going from 0 units of housing to, you know, what, maybe a few hundred, depending on what your dimensional controls are. You would lose green space. It would be a fundamental shift in the character of that neighborhood. Here, this is an overlay district on top of our existing multifamily district. You know, maybe the building would end up being a little taller or a little bit wider or, you know, what have you, but fundamentally, at the end of the day, it would transition from a multifamily housing development to a multifamily housing development, right? And we're protected, I think, a little bit in that way. We're encouraging redevelopment of existing spaces and trying to preserve the green space that we have.
Tony, it
left.
looked like you wanted to chime in.
Just briefly on the Windsor Gardens, I mean, that, as you know, is our largest complex at more than 900 units. It's also 60-plus years old. So the idea that a increase in the density there might encourage a developer or a builder at some point to reinvest in a significant way where maybe some of the existing stock goes away and new stock is built. Maybe you have 12 units in a building, you can tear it down and build something new. Because even though you can refresh housing, it was built 60 years ago, it was before units had air conditioning regularly, a lot of them don't have in-unit washer dryers. A lot of the things that we consider sort of normal for housing today wasn't necessarily the case 60 years ago. So we don't want to have the oldest stock of housing in the country or in the Commonwealth, and I know our public housing is already aging, so that's an idea of if we've got to have it, it's going to be there for a long time. There's those 900 plus units. Perhaps it creates that development incentive to start refreshing some of the older stock of housing, because what we don't want is as the housing stock grows in the region to continue to be the place with the oldest rental stock in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thanks.
Did you have anything else? I didn't.
I'm all set.
Mr. Plasko?
Yeah, just following up on that, I think that is what would happen. It would be all new, tear down, like we're seeing happening even with single-family homes. They would make a pretty significant financial decision. They'd have to move people out, vacate units, and tear down and build up. I think what they would probably do is get rid of all the townhouses, and build apartment buildings, and then move their way back up through the development back out onto Walpole Street. That's probably the most logical construction management of the site. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Sarah. I've sat down twice now and had been given personal time to review this. I've been reading all kinds of information. I've got copies of Lexington and Braintree and Milton. I've been studying those and find it all very interesting. And tell me about the process. You submitted a draft. You submitted an article for us to put on the town meeting. We haven't even had public hearings or anything yet. So if you have public hearings, and as a result of those hearings, you decide to make changes. But we've already got the article published. Does every change now you have to offer as an amendment? How do you mechanically handle this?
So this is the process that Norwood has always followed for zoning changes. Under state law, planning board is obligated to hold a public hearing on anything that's on the warrant. And the paperwork we submit to the Attorney General's office reflects that. When was the article placed on the warrant? How many days passed between placement on the warrant and the public hearing? And we provide documentation of all of that. Placement on the warrant is the precipitating action for the public hearing. Which isn't to say that the board hasn't already discussed this in public session, but it holds the hearing after it's been submitted to you, to this body, for the warrant. Which isn't to say that changes cannot be made. And we've seen that for many of the other zoning amendments that town meeting has passed, where, you could make a floor amendment at town meeting, suggested by a town meeting member. But even prior to that, it's standard. It happened with the Boston Providence Highway District, where the public hearing was held. There were some changes to the map, parcels to include or exclude, some changes to the landscaping and the buffer requirements between commercial and residential. That was all generated as part of that public process, and it was presented as a floor amendment at town meeting. So there is some capacity to make changes and be responsive to the public's
But if we're making
comments.
amendments at town meeting, we're also restricted doing what's considered less, not more.
Yes. In this particular case, too, I would say there is some sensitivity to compliance. The compliance model for this, like I said, it's a complex spreadsheet. And so minor changes that wouldn't have a big impact on our compliance, I think could be fine, but anything that would fundamentally shift our compliance with the acreage, the unit capacity, those sort of things, we would want to just be careful of doing, because we'll have received pre-approval from the state on specific language. So we don't want to make changes that would put that compliance at
Some of
risk.
the stuff I'm concerned with, we go down the road and certain things happen. How do we handle that, and how do we
Right.
move forward? I'm also concerned with knowing that what we pass is approved. An example, and I don't know, I could be even totally wrong, but it's a fear I have, that we approve that we want 20% housing for over 16 units to be affordable. And after we approve that and approve the zoning, thinking we're gonna get that, they cut out just that one section. And we have the rest of the zoning, because we've approved it, without that condition. We wanna know we're gonna get what we're approving.
Oh, you're saying when we send it to the state?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the affordability, if I may, the state's guidelines set the cap on affordability at 10% of the overall portfolio. The thought being that across the 177 communities, the markets are pretty different in each of those towns, and in some communities, I don't think ours, but in some communities, you could set an inclusionary zoning requirement at a high level, and it would completely stop any development dead in its tracks. It could be used as a tool to kind of get around all of this. And so any municipality that wanted to impose affordability at a rate above 10% needed to conduct an economic feasibility analysis. So we did have that economic feasibility analysis completed. We secured a grant from Mass Housing Partnership in order to pay for the consultant to do that. And the response was that the local market can support a 20% affordability requirement in projects that are 16 units or more. We had originally written it as 8 units or more, but the recommendation was 16 units or more is what our market can support. So as long as we're consistent with that EFA, that analysis, then I have confidence that the state will approve that particular requirement at least.
Well, I'm thrilled, I guess I want to say, that the state did consider different input and changed their guidelines 3 times now. And the 3rd time is a heck of a lot better than the first time. First time we had language, additional new units. Now we know we're starting from ground up, and that's a whole lot different and helps us a lot, particularly here in Norwood. I think a lot of work's gone into this. I unfortunately personally have a lot of disagreements with it. I don't think, I'm not in favor of mixed use on the central station portion of this zone, of these zones. I don't like the definition they use. I don't like the things that we have to include. I don't like the fact that by allowing that, it allows the developer to go up another floor. If we don't have that, if we just accept the fact that the state has said we have to have housing, and we're gonna meet that mandate, let's build housing. Why are we building these other, allowing these other things to go in there? I have a number of concerns. I won't go over them all tonight, but you know, a lot of disagreements with some fine comments that have been made. My other, try to state just some of the bigger concerns. We have to make a mandate. We want to keep the character of the community as much as possible. We want to have low-rise and the lowest mid-rise possible to keep a more of a urban feeling than a suburban, a suburban feeling than an urban feeling for the community. And some of these conditions that we have in this, some of these standards that we have in here kind of works against that. It goes just the opposite. I also don't like the fact that we've designed districts that exceed what we have to do in both land and potential units. And in doing that, we open up some areas to development that I don't really think we want to do personally. I'm thinking the property on East Hoyle, across from the hospital, the 2 lots there. We're making that so it can be residential. We just had a debate whether to include that in the hospital zone or not, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. And we reasoned, planning department suggested to us we want that to be part of the hospital, and we want to attract other medical businesses. We want to get the commercial tax, so the residential tax, blah, blah, blah. And we presented town meeting, we got it, we just got an overlay district. So now we have the underlying district, the overlay district, and now we're talking about another overlay district. On top of that, to allow the housing. We know, unless we put our head in the sands, that if we make that housing, it's going to be housing tomorrow. That'll be done before the hospital's done. That'll be housing before the hospital's complete, unfortunately, with the way things are going there right now. And do we want that? Do we need that? The underlying zoning allows houses, multifamily housing, through the zoning board, Board of Appeals, but it allows it. So why are we adding more and encouraging more instead of the commercial type uses, the medical uses that we just decided we wanted there? I just don't see opening it up to that. We know, we talk about, and most of it's 98% true, that this development's not going to happen for a long time. It's going to happen over time. We're not going to see a big influx, except for in at least 3 areas. And that's one of them. And why are we encouraging that? The Sabagram property, the Lenox Street property, that's going to happen overnight once we approve the zoning. So why are we taking on East Hoyle Street when there's no need to? If we needed to make the land area, if we needed to to make the unit count. Maybe it makes sense, but we don't need to.
I think, Mr. Plasko, and I'm going to have Sarah is much better answering these than I am, but there is Amanda Norwood has a number of 2,043?
47.
For 2047, the total, if everything was built out. So by expanding your land, you've spread out your buildings versus small area, tall buildings.
If we
You
didn't
have to
allow,
prove- you have
we
to
didn't
prove
allow
to
the
the
higher,
state.
but we're allowing the higher, that's why we have higher number of
But
units.
we also have to prove to the state. If everyone says, well, it's 15 units per acre, 50 acres, that's 750 units. Well, the state, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, we have to prove to the state that we could, in maximum build-out, tear-down build-out, that we could show the state that we could possibly build 2,045 units. And at 15 units per acre on 50 acres, you cannot prove that.
No, but this, looking at this draft is for approximately 3,000 units. We only need 2,045. This draft is the town has to have a minimum, and have more if you need it to meet the requirement, but you have to minimum 50 acres. We're going up to 80 acres, and we don't need it to meet other requirements. We can meet the requirements doing less.
I don't know if I answered that correctly, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, compliance is an equation, right? And so one of those areas has to be exceeded. The other concern is with the subdistricts. Creating subdistricts allows us to create dimensional controls that respect the character of those existing neighborhoods. One example of that, right, is that Norwood Central, because you've got, you know, single-family homes and duplexes across the street, that one has that step-back requirement, right? Where at 40 feet, you get the taller building, but all of the height is pushed towards the rear to minimize that canyon effect and protect the daylight, right, and all of that for the single-family homes across the street. That's specific to that area. It's a dimensional control that respects that specific neighborhood. Norwood Depot, you've got a much smaller front setback to get that like walkable, you know, pedestrian, you know, experience where you're kind of checking things out from the street. In order to create a subdistrict, the state says that a subdistrict has to be a minimum of 5 acres, and at least one subdistrict has to be contiguous 50% of your total acreage. So some of that math, you know, kind of came into play when putting parcels together to be able to create a subdistrict that meets those standards, making sure that you include enough property in the subdistrict. I will say also that part of the reason for including more of these parcels, a lot of them are, again, already multifamily housing and are not going, really, there's no incentive to be redeveloped. They're included in these parcels because it creates a zoning district where the uses are consistent and where the zoning is consistent. It maybe brings some of these non-conforming properties closer to being conforming, which is ultimately what we want for our zoning. And so, yes, that in some instances looks like an excess of the unit capacity or an excess of the land area. But it really helps us to come into compliance, not just with the state law, but also making sure that, you know, there's consistency within the district. And the final point I would make, and, you know, I don't have a strong feeling about that property on East Hoyle. But when the question was, do we want to just comply or do we want to take this opportunity to encourage reinvestment and better uses, that was a parcel that specifically came up to be included. It has been rezoned for medical uses for a number of years, but there has been no reinvestment in that site. It is paved over and vacant. It's a stormwater, you know, management nightmare. There's no improvement to the property whatsoever. It's largely vacant. So this would be an additional use. Potential to develop under the medical overlay would continue to be there. And so if the market, you know, demanded that that particular use and that was lucrative and attractive, then it could still be developed as that. But this just kind of adds something to that property to encourage some redevelopment on it. Right now, it's not bringing in a lot of tax revenue to the town. It's not really serving a whole lot of the community's needs. So that was the rationale for including it.
I don't want to debate all night, but, you know, the having to use different areas to make sub-districts, that works for Depot. It doesn't work for this. We already have the land area on the Lennox Street. It
Yep.
doesn't need this additional acreage over any soil to make it work. We haven't had development there because that development's going to happen after there's a hospital, after there's medical in the area, and unfortunately, a lot out of our control hasn't happened. If, you know, you read the newspapers the last few days, there could be a lot changing down there, and we could very well have another, you know, operator down there running that hospital, a hospital from that scene, which could very well want to use that site for a lot of other
Maybe.
accessory type of operations to go along with the hospital. And if it's already become apartments, which we know it'll be overnight, we lose that opportunity. I think it's an opportunity worth holding on to myself.
Thanks for that feedback.
There's been
We can
talk
certainly
about, you know,
discuss it.
affordability. If people can't afford to come to Norwood, this is going to do nothing to make Norwood affordable. If anything, it's going to make Norwood less affordable. There's reason for it. There's housing needed in the state and so on and so forth. I'm not getting into that whole big issue, but point for point, it still nothing to make any community more affordable. Now, if I can just go to a couple of questions on your act, I'll leave the more philosophical stuff for the hearings, town meeting, wherever we decide to go with this, as we keep concentrating on it and keep thinking about it, what's best for the community. No final decisions anywhere, at least on my part, but a lot of concerns and thoughts. But on your bylaw itself, as I'm looking at it, and I'm getting down to two nitty-picky things right now. Parking, and there's a parking B. It says parking of pickup trucks, not more than 6,250 pounds gross vehicle weight. Shouldn't it just be any vehicle over that weight? Once somebody making an argument that this line's not a pickup truck, it's a dump truck. Isn't the weight, the size of the vehicle more than the fact it's a pickup?
That is language that exists in the zoning bylaw already.
Doesn't answer my question, does it?
I didn't write that. I don't know when it was put in there,
I
but
think it's something we should
this
look
was,
at.
this is something that's in the use table.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, a response to that for every district we have in town. For whatever reason, the zoning bylaw kind of quantifies that.
I just want to see if it's something we want to change, but I want to ask council. I
Yeah.
mean, today it may never seem like an issue, but somebody may make a challenge to you, and you may not have a ground to stand on.
Yeah, I would say, let's put that on the list for further review and study for
Just ask
another
council, maybe I'm
bylaw
totally
change.
wrong, but I think you want to look at it.
Outside of this article, it would be a change that we'd want to apply to, you
Yeah.
know, any district.
Right.
So, thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the other thing, you have waivers by the planning board. And one of them is municipal lots and mixed-use buildings require commercial parking spaces may be offset by publicly available parking spaces in a municipal lot located within 700 feet. Who's the planning board to decide what happens in a public parking lot? That's the selectmen. And who says whether they're available or not, and how, if it's even gonna be parking tomorrow? So how can the planning board have control over that?
Again, that's language
And that's not really a turf battle, is.
No, understood. Understood. That's language that's already been approved by town meeting for our central business district. It's not necessarily about a permit to use the municipal parking on behalf of the tenant. It's more just saying that there are opportunities available in the area for parking, you know, that would justify or mitigate the reduction of on-site parking for a particular, you know, building.
We're not giving them permission.
But we're not giving anybody
The
permission.
planning board is not giving anyone
No,
permission.
but you're giving them a
to-
waiver to something else saying there's parking
Well,
over
they
there.
have to-
Maybe there
that-
is no parking over there.
Yeah.
You see a parking lot, but it's not available to them.
Then you can't get it.
Thank you, appreciate you putting up with my time.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. In terms of the timeline from here to town meeting, what is the public's opportunity to weigh in?
We have I don't know if Sarah has the dates. I think starting Monday morning we start, right?
Mhm. Yep, so we have.
Full disclosure, I know the answer to this question.
Thank you for the layout. So there are 2 open houses scheduled for members of the public to swing by Memorial Hall during the day between 9 and 11 on January 29th and February 16th. These are informal settings. I know some people aren't comfortable necessarily speaking up at public hearings, so we'll have coffee and refreshments for people to just chat with, any board members or planning staff, and just learn more about the proposal. There will be a similar event on March 11th at 7 p.m. That one will be online, so that folks who can't necessarily stop by Town Hall between 9 and 11 on a work day, they can log on remotely and similarly ask those questions in a more relaxed environment. There is a planning board public hearing. That's probably the most crucial opportunity for input. That will be a hybrid on February 12th. At 7 p.m., either at the Senior Center in person or remotely. People can also check out everything on our website and write letters to the planning board. So if you're not able to attend, members of the public are strongly encouraged to write letters to the board to be considered as part of the record during their hearing. There's a town meeting member information session on February 28th at 6:30 p.m. I think the location is still TBD. So folks should check back on the town's website for a location on that as it gets closer. And then there's a meeting on February 5th scheduled just for property owners in the affected district to be able to answer any specific questions that they have about changes to their property and the available zoning. So we will be sending invitations out to that for that event later this week. And then, of course, town meeting itself.
And the bylaw is on the website?
Yes, so on the Town of Norwood's homepage, on the left navigation menu, there's a direct link. Thank you for that suggestion, Mr. Plasko. There's a direct link to MBTA Communities Initiative, and that takes you to a website. All of this information and more information than actually I think anybody needs or wants about this is there, including the map, the proposed bylaw, and we've also added a really helpful FAQ section that I think will walk through a lot of the concerns that people might have about this and questions that we do hear frequently at our events.
Great, thank you. And can I just ask a hypothetical, sort of a process question? So say the parcel that you were talking about on East Hoyle, the auto dock, that is, say consensus builds that the town says that's not a parcel that we want included. What's the best way to go about sort of proposing an alternative or taking that out without sort of becoming chaos at town meeting?
Chaos.
I appreciate that question. Always like to avoid chaos when we can, right? I would say the feedback would be most productively given to the planning board at their public hearing.
Okay.
I think that would make sure that it happens in public session with public input. It's been advertised according to our legal standards. I think that's probably the best way to go about that change. And then the planning board can make a recommendation in their report to town meeting to adopt the article with amendments.
And we've done that, there's precedent
We've done
for
that
yeah.
lots of times.
That's assuming they agree.
Assuming they agree.
Well, I mean, anyone can make a.
But anybody can make a suggestion.
An amendment on the town meeting floor. The only caveat I would throw out on that is ahead of time, and we can do it with Sarah, is that if that is something that is a possibility, that with that being removed, we're still, all our eggs are still in the basket. We haven't done something that is going to hurt us with the state.
Right, and that was the point you made.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're still good, and that we can still make.
And there might be people that feel strongly that it should stay in.
Right. I would say if you have any big suggestions like that, certainly participate in the public hearing, but maybe write your comments to the board and submit them 5 days before the hearing is the deadline. That would give me and my team a chance to run the numbers and calculate any compliance issues.
You don't
to
want to do
make
it on the
sure.
fly at a town meeting?
A little bit of a challenge to do, even in the course of a public
Yeah.
hearing at planning board. Certainly at town meeting, we'll be prepared to do that as needed. But to give me a little bit of time
But
to
you've already-
research
you've already
impact
run that
would be
that-
helpful.
That site.
Yeah, I don't think the loss of that site would
wouldn't have
impact our
any effect.
compliance.
We know we don't need the acreage and the numbers wouldn't, doesn't do anything to the numbers.
Okay.
But if you have any other thoughts, please feel free to reach out to my.
Mr. Sad?
Sarah, thank you, and Ernie and the whole board. I have just a question, kind of like spot zoning.
Yeah.
So the developer that just came in over there by Ambrose Press is ripping down a two-family that was just remodeled 15 years ago and tearing it down because he can get more numbers. So I guess my question is, if this passes and we have a developer wants to come in the next block, right next to an adjacent zone of this magnitude, would the ZBA, or could he go to court and challenge it and say, spot zoning, and I want 30 units on my acreage because you just gave it to the guy right next door?
Not if he's not in the zone.
Yeah,
Well, that's
so
what I make
this,
sure.
It would
this
be-
overlay would only be for what town meeting votes, the changes to the
All right,
map.
just so the people in
the
the public
boundaries.
understand.
That's a good question, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Now, he would still have the opportunity
to go to the board.
to go
Yeah, if you wanted to.
as, say, Lennox Street did a year ago or something. He would still have an opportunity on his own to propose to town meeting on his piece of property, but that would...
He couldn't do it by right.
He couldn't do it by right. He would have to go through the
Or
same
she.
hurdles
Or
that, I'll use Lennox Street, like Lennox Street did a year or two
Good.
ago.
All right, well, thank you all.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you,
The
Mr.
building
Chairman.
commissioner as zoning enforcement authority, their responsibility is to enforce the will of town meeting and their votes on the zoning bylaw. So if something is proposed, a building permit application comes in that's not in compliance with what town meeting approves, then it stops dead in the tracks right there.
Good, okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sarah, Ernie, and
Okay.
the
Of course.
board.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks
And
for your
we'll,
time.
Thanks for your
we'll
time.
see you a lot over the next couple of months, I'm sure. Okay. All right, we were on, you were all set?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna go back to,
Capital.
yeah. So we are going back to
4.2.
4.2 FY25 capital outlay plan, review and discussion of preliminary FY25 capital outlay plan. You or Mr. Donnelly?
I'll start, and then Mr. Donnelly can come in as the closer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. What you have in front of you is just an early draft of the FY25 projected capital projects. That's as of today. This is, of course, still subject to significant revision. Capital outlay hasn't gone through it, and we take up capital at the November town meeting, so we are 10 months from then. What we wanted to do was just get this list, which has been in the document, the 5-year document, to the board early on in case there's any projects of particular note that you want to spend some time looking in or learning about. We will be getting updates on both existing projects or approved projects and where they are, as well as this list develops, we'll be including the board on memoranda that we send to capital outlay regarding this update, regarding the plan as it is.
Great, Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, so thank you for the list. You know, we're beginning our look at the FY25 capital project starting next week. It's the first meeting of the year for capital outlay, and I thought this would be a pretty good starting point, but I was just proposing that the board, get a copy of it before outlay commences its work. We'll start our work next week, building out the plan for a review of capital projects. Couple of things that we want to keep our eye on, and I know that the outlay will have questions about this too, is it looks first glance at this is that we don't have, in the general fund side, we don't have any significantly expensive projects. We had a couple last year. We had the traffic signal lights in the Hawes Pool, so this year looks to be a list of projects that don't reach that level, but we're always going to keep an eye on and work with the town to as we get closer to our understanding of what kind of free cash we're looking at. We'll have a more thorough discussion at that point regarding whether there is a need to borrow for any of these projects. It doesn't appear that on initial glance that they would be, and I know the FinCom certainly has observed that in essence we should be very moderate in our borrowing, if not to have any increase or net borrowing going forward. But those are just some of the items as we go forward throughout the coming months to be cognizant of, and it really won't all come together until the summer, when we've had a chance to vet the projects with the department heads, and then be able to get a closer look as we get closer to certification of free cash, just to see where they are. We'll keep the board informed. Kind of hopeful looking at this list and looking at what we have projected for last year's and hopefully this coming year's free cash, that we'll be able to do a lot of this work within our free cash certification. But that remains to be seen. But I just wanted to make sure you folks had a look at what's upcoming before the committee started its work next week.
And if I could just add one point, on the free cash note, we are anticipating another year of healthy free cash. I can't say that those will continue, but we've received probably upwards of $6 million in permit fees this fiscal year, which will go into our next year free cash calculation. So we should be able to enter into the next fiscal year and the next capital outlay process, being able to pay for cash for most of our capital projects.
Is FM Global a big piece of that?
Yeah.
And the only other piece of information regarding the outlay work is that I credit Mr. Rosen. He's staffing the committee, and he's done an excellent job. Every quarter, the committee is getting an update from the town manager's office regarding the status of our approved projects, which has really been helpful and to us. And as your representative on capital outlay, as we get those updates, I will ensure that you have an understanding of what the status of those projects, and if there's any bumps in the road, I'll certainly will make an effort to make sure you are aware of them as well. So thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, anything from the rest of the board on that? Ms. Plasko?
No, I think this is good. Thank you for getting it to us early. I think when we have some time to review it and maybe think it through and maybe ask some questions, it might be pertinent to talk about it some more with our representative before it gets too far down the road. But just a quick question on number one.
Yeah.
Pickup truck. Aren't we trying to get those into budgets? Why is it still on capital?
We are. So we're still finalizing the list. The DPW has, we budget about $300,000 a year to take care of their, what we call regular fleet. And then their larger trucks, they would still come to capital for. This one is possible, it's left in there as an out year, or there are some departments that we haven't built in a budget for vehicles for yet because they're on sort of an off cycle. So this is not a recreation truck, but recreation is an example where they have two vehicles. They replace them every 7 to 10 years. We're not going to build into the budget money for recreation. We haven't gotten to building in sort of an unallocated vehicle for the divisions that come up once in a while for a vehicle. So it's possible that that's what that is. We are up to about, I think it's $900,000 in the budget for vehicles, which you go back 6 or 7 years, it was zero. We are going to make a couple more tweaks to that. This year, I think we're going to put cemetery in there because cemetery almost comes up just about every year for a vehicle when you think of the size of the fleet and how old we want to keep the vehicles before we cycle them down. Cemetery is roughly every, would probably be the next one that we add into there.
Okay. Like I said, I think we might have some questions whether we even want to support going forward with some projects or not, but that's for another day after we've spent some reasonable time educating ourselves, not just going by the seat of our pants. But thank you for the information.
Yeah, it's good to get eyes on now.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, appreciate it. Okay, and the last item, 4.3, draft warrant and yellow sheet. Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board does have a copy of our draft warrant and yellow sheet. We would appreciate any feedback you have on either. The board is scheduled tentatively to sign the warrant on February 12th at your meeting. At that point, we would, if the board is ready, like to get the board's thoughts on the yellow sheet and your votes of support or non-support, proposition. On the 12th, we can then get that up to town meeting well ahead of time. If you want to delay that another meeting, we can always do that, but because this is sort of our planned mid-year land use only meeting, we're in good shape. I do realize that the planning board may have some changes that night, so the board may want to delay another week or two based on what those changes are, but that is the next step in the process. But it appears as if the warrant and yellow sheet are done in draft form, ready for any comment or input.
In the draft form at the moment, it's only planning board article.
Correct, that's what we've been trying to plan for this March
We
town
haven't heard from
meeting.
anybody else, anything that helped to go on at this time?
No, we had let departments know to get us anything by, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago was the date, but we also really wanted it to be
And otherwise, we'll
land
probably
use.
still have a special before the end of this thing.
Absolutely, oh yeah.
Thank you.
Bob, looked like you were going to say
Does it
something.
make any sense for us as we, we could come back on February 12th and we could all mark this up and start giving input. Does it make any sense that if we have any observations in advance of February 12th, we funnel them to the chair and to Mr. Mizuko, just so it's a little, we may be able to update and comment and correct pretty quickly if we just have the information in advance to the chair and to the general manager.
Absolutely. Any sort of editorial comments or questions, just send them directly to me in the manager's office. We'll take care of them. In the past, we used to sort of make editorial changes at a board meeting. We found that just getting the comments and trying to work them in works better. That way, at your meeting on the 12th, assuming that we know exactly what the planning board's putting forward, you can take your votes on them.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, if there's any significant disagreement, we would simply bring it back to the board and say, hey, there's 2 different ways this is looked at. What does the board want to do?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good?
I'm fine.
All right. Selectmen's agenda. Mr. Sad, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, I have a question.
Yes.
A lot of the people on South Norwood on Wednesday didn't get they got their trash picked up, but they didn't think they were getting their trash picked up because it was a holiday on Monday. So my question is, if situations like that, can we send is there like a robo phone call that goes out?
So we do when trash is missed. We,
Yeah.
as a town, tend not to overuse our robo notification system because what you find is that people sort of become deaf to it. And honestly, every time we do send out notifications, we get a lot of angry calls that people forget they signed up for it. We publish the calendar, we put it out, we mail it to every household. It's been a couple of years since we've had magnets. Believe it or not, a couple of years ago, we weren't able to get the magnet calendars because of a supply chain issue around COVID, which is absurd. We keep asking and they keep telling us it's difficult. I'm sure we can rearrange it. If we were to start trying to send out a robo notification, we have to make sure people are signed up for that robo notification. There will still be some folks who didn't, but we published the calendar ahead of time. And I'm sure, unfortunately, most folks do what I do and grab the calendar and think they looked at the right date and then they didn't. I make the mistake all the time.
And the other thing, Mr. Chairman, go ahead, Bill.
I was gonna say, it's online and so forth, as the manager said,
I know.
but easy thing for people to remember that I just figured out myself, because I had the same question this year, whether this was a pickup week or not. There's only 3 Mondays that they don't pick up. So get those 3, and every other one, put your trash out on the regular day.
Every
It's the
other,
big holidays.
put your trash out. And
I'm laughing because I didn't, I'm in the district as well, I know what you're talking about, and I was, in my head, I was going, oh, it's a holiday, and then I
Yeah.
started seeing all my neighbors take their
I got a lot of phone
receptacles
calls. I don't know
out.
if you all got phone calls, but I got a lot.
Yeah.
Next thing, I know, I saw an email about the meatball factory, about putting signs up around.
Yeah, we're gonna be bringing something to the
Roundabout.
board to post a couple of other areas as no truck or trailer traffic. We're continuing to ticket, and we're actually looking at the site plan review, and at some point, pending enough notification, the building commissioner might start issuing site plan violations to the property owner. It's a little ridiculous.
The trucks that are idling.
Yeah, and the trucks have some responsibility, but it is somebody just told to make delivery, and there's no room, and they're under construction, so we're gonna continue aggressively ticketing trucks when we can. We are gonna post a couple additional streets. We have to go through our process. We'll be bringing that to the board in a couple weeks. And at some point, the building commissioner is gonna start being able to issue fines and even deny COs for whole market foods, because this is becoming ridiculous.
Good, thank you. And a couple things. The girls' basketball, boys' basketball, 8-3. Girls' hockey's 4-7. Boys' hockey's 7-1-1. And the wrestling team is 9-3. Turned it around since Bill's son was on the team. And the swim team's doing great. And I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. And I thank everybody and continue the great work.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Sad.
you.
Ms. Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing exciting from me tonight, other than I'll just re-plug another reminder for folks to come out to the Impact Norwood meet and greet at the Civic this Thursday night. So especially parents, we're really interested in getting parents involved. So if you don't have a plan for Thursday night, make it come into the Civic and getting involved with Impact Norwood. That'll be from starting at 6. And you don't have to be there for the whole time. One of the format things I did want to let folks know is this is more casual. You can sort of drop in and come and go as you need. So you do not have to commit to the full time block.
Great,
Thank you very much.
thanks. Mr. Plasko?
We've had some news in the papers that, things we don't like to talk about if we don't have to, but it's right out there having to do with the hospital. I was wondering, do we have a fire detail there?
When there's welding work going on.
Only when there's welding work going on. And they have lights all the time. Make sure they're current with any payments to the town.
We will.
Thank you. That's it.
Good point.
All my money. What apartments?
I hear you. Mr. Donnelly?
Oh, just some reminders. So, again, we talked about this last meeting. January 27th, Saturday, we have an event for those folks who are seeking nomination, getting their nomination papers signed for town offices. That's on the 27th, Saturday on the Common at noon time. So if you have a office you're interested in running for, if you're a town meeting member that needs to get signatures or to run, it's a great opportunity for folks to go there and get your nomination papers signed, and you'll meet some of your colleagues that are also running for offices. January 29th, next Monday, we will have the second meeting of the Master Plan Committee Steering Group, so looking forward to that. Mr. Easy reminded me to make sure I mentioned this concert committee was here 2 weeks ago, and we have a very nice brochure now, and the first concert is coming up. Sunday the 28th, the Compact Big Band at the high school, starting at 2 p.m. So that's a reminder for folks. Free admission and all are welcome, and Compact Big Band is a really good band. They played a number of times in Norwood over the past few years. And tomorrow evening, I know Mr. Lane is going to be in attendance. He's a member of the Community Preservation Committee, but the hearing on the consideration for the improvements to the Morse Hill Park is scheduled to be there tomorrow, and we'll be presenting information to the CPC on that particular project. So we're looking forward to doing that and hopefully getting some good feedback from the CPC. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I was going to plug that in my remarks. So
I stole your thunder, I'm sorry.
I'll just add that this past weekend, the Norwood Historical Society, in conjunction with Norwood High School and their photography students, had an exhibit at the Day House, and it was really cool. They were tasked with sort of interpretations of what exists in the Day House, but sort of through the lens, literally, of their work they're doing. But these kids were so talented, and I think it was an introduction to photography class, which is crazy. But it was really cool, and so much thanks to the Norwood Historical Society for opening that up for us in advance of the public exhibit that was this past weekend. And I just want to add that, the subject matter tonight, the housing, it's tricky, there's some contention, but I do appreciate the decor of everyone here, and the way that we were able to have input and opinions and work with Sarah and the planning board, so I just appreciate the tenor of that conversation. That's it.
So moved.
Okay, motion to adjourn made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Thank you and good night.